The Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app, streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. And on a Friday, we always welcome in my friend Clinton Yates, of course, host of ESPN Daily, which, Clinton, you can listen to daily. Yes, daily. On your favorite podcast app. Of course, you can also watch him on Around the Horn and read his work on Anscape at ESPN.com. So, sir, we want to talk about a story that we touched on briefly at the end of the show yesterday. But the Mystics have moved their game coming up in June against the Indiana Fever, which, of course, just selected Caitlin Clark, number 1 overall in the WNBA draft, to Capital One Arena. Yet another signal of this ever-changing sports landscape, certainly of which women's sports and specifically women's basketball has become a much larger part, and especially over the last year, kind of since that LSU-Iowa game. But this has been a steady rise for a while that has just had some kind of accelerant poured on the fire here. But what do you make of that news and kind of all these other stories that are, for better or for worse, popping up as a result?
Well, I think it's good news, number one. And number two, I think it's highly necessary. And third, I think that we're moving towards what I would plainly just call a new normal. That interaction between that Indy Star reporter and columnist, and Caitlin Clark in their introductory press conference, that was the kind of thing that happened in the old world, in which this crusty, frankly, old white man kind of contingent of people who held the reins of what were considered to be important in sports just isn't an important person in the room anymore. And so the reason that's important is because that interaction was so far off base. It was clear that a lot of men in the sports industry are simply not ready to not be the center of the conversation, even when the women who are athletes are superstars. And that, to me, is something that we really got to make sure that we understand. I think just as a populace of sports fans, like, hey, guess what, dude? Nobody cares if you don't like the basketball. There are plenty of people who do. And the idea of trying to grow those games for the sake of, again, who we are as a sports populace and who we are as people, I think is one of the most exciting things to come that I've seen in a long time as a sports fan, never mind a journalist.
Yeah, for sure. I think, we could go forever on this, and we could bring in sociology professors, because in some ways we're talking about like shifting population dynamics and marketing, and like there are so many angles to this story. But for years, sports has been marketed to one particular kind. And like, this is the thing, by the way, that it's not just white dudes in sports. Like, there are certain products that are targeted at all kinds of demographics. Sports radio, like, we look at ratings in certain target demos, and that determines, how our bosses say that we're doing. Like, this is nothing new. It's just who the target demo is for sports is changing. And a part of that is because what we consider sports, and especially, maybe better put, what we consider mainstream sports, has changed. And, again, like, there's been certain changes that have been ongoing for a while, but the way that Clark specifically, with obviously supporting help from Angel Reese and so many others, but Clark has just been such a phenomenon where, like, yes, other games are selling out on schedules, but the Aces, the Mystics, and others are moving their games to bigger arenas when she's in town. That it has just changed the status quo, what feels like overnight in some ways, and that's going to have consequences.
It is, and I think that the only reason that we really call Clark the phenomenon is because of the numbers, but the phenomenon truly is the game. Looking, they were selling out games all over the place in the Final Four and have been all season in, like, let's just say the SEC or what have you. And for me, it's about a rising tide lifting all boats kind of situation. And I want to live in a world in which women's sports are taken as seriously and is promoted as highly as all of the other sports that we consider to be mainstream. And I don't understand these guys that get out there and they're talking about this and talking about that. What is the exact purpose of being a hater on women's sports? Like, can somebody explain that to me? Because it is such a bizarre indication of insecurity from guys that claim to be big-time sports fans, that they can't handle the notion that somebody who is a basketball player is more famous than their favorite men's whatever player. It's just such a strange, you talk about sociology kind of mindset that I will never understand it. But I think here's another thing, too. It's that, and you've worked around these parts, so you understand this. a women's professional team sports league moving higher up the ranks of our general cultural consciousness is just a world we've never really lived in like that. The U.S. women's national team is not the same. That's a tournament team. It's not quite the same thing with college basketball because, again, those are linked to institutions. The WNBA itself is in one of the more unique positions it's been in a long time to simply remind people, yeah, not only are these athletes really good players, but they're awesome humans often, and even cooler people to root for as stars, basketball aside. And that, to me, is just such a fantastic opportunity that I have no concept of why people would want to look down upon that.
Clint Yates with us, of course, commentator for ESPN. And you just hit on a couple of things that I closed the show with yesterday. And first, just to kind of clarify something, that's why I use the term accelerant for Clark, is these trends have been going this way. She just pushed it to a new level, but this has been coming. As you said, there have been sellouts all over the place. I mean, the Aces sold out a bunch of stuff last year. I mean, they sold out their season tickets for this year pretty instantaneously, but as someone who's been to Aces games in Las Vegas, it's one thing to sell out the 8,000 seat arena or whatever Michelob Ultra is versus the 20,000 seat that they sold out just as instantly when the Fever are in town. So it's an accelerant here. But to your point, my thing has always been on women's sports. As someone who has been covering them since college. I mean, I called women's games in college and we would talk about them. And part of that was, frankly, like I kind of stumbled into that because the culture at Middle Tennessee State, where I started school before transferring to Syracuse, was the women's basketball team was better than the men. They were more worth talking about because they had more eyes on them. And turns out the star on that team was someone named Alicia Clark, which is why I still have a great relationship with the WNBA and the Aces, because she's now won a bunch of rings and is one of our best friends. But that's kind of just how it was. And then, but my argument has always been exactly what you said. If you want more good sports, then support the sports. Like ultimately, especially with the way the W is right now, which I do wonder as this league continues to grow, if it's going to have to change. It's a summer season. Like, I mean, you're as big of a baseball fan as anyone, but for me, who's not as big of a baseball guy, like summer's pretty bleak. Like there's only so many training camp segment countdowns we can do. There's only so much waiting for football I want to do. I would like to talk about real sports, and there are real sports happening in the summer, and the WNBA and the NWSL currently are two of the biggest leagues, along with Major League Baseball, that will go during the summer. And if enough people care that I, on my mainstream sports talk radio show, can talk about them, that is good. That is great. Give me more sports. And I don't understand why anyone would be anti more good sports.
It's mind-boggling, and it's just, I don't know. Sometimes it's kind of disheartening, but I'm not the kind of person that wallows in potential failures of things. I just look at this and I say, man, can you imagine being a little girl right now, or even just a young sports fan in general, with so many burgeoning options of not just sports you can watch, but people you can like and root for? There seems to be this notion that a lot of people hit me up on Twitter with this kind of nonsense, which is those people aren't really there for basketball. So what? Who cares? What does it matter why somebody is in the arena if they are enjoying the experience and they like what they are looking at? You trying to tell me that every single person that goes to a ballpark knows who is in the bullpen or what the starting pitcher's ERA is? Unlikely, dog. You know what I'm saying? And so all of these weird goalpost shifting things that we talk about when we talk about why various women's sports won't succeed are just mind-boggling. Like, people like it. There's nothing wrong with that, and it doesn't matter why. And it's getting to this point now where when I meet people who have any sort of a chortle or snort, when I bring up women's sports of any kind, you're getting axed out of my life most likely, because what time period are you living in, dog? It's just such a strange thing. And the reason why I wanted to talk about this is because I want to implore all of the people out there who cover these sports, who like these sports, and who spend and invest in these sports to keep it going. All right? We are trying to grow something here. We're not trying to sit back and compare ourselves to what other things were like. That will never make sense, and it is not a recipe for success, Gregory.
Right. It's not a scarcity mindset. Here's the other thing I'll say, though, kind of on that front. Like the NWSL and the WNBA are not charity projects. These athletes are not charity projects. And I think that is where like a Gregg Doyel gets himself in incredibly like deep water. Also, all the women that came out afterwards and were like, I also have a creepy Gregg Doyel story. And I was like, oh, so when you did some actual important reporting and used to be a real journalist, you were also a terrible person, huh? Great. Glad that came to light.
Trending poorly for him.
Yeah, not good. But like this, the way to support is to treat sports like sports. Like, the way to do this is not to beg and plead and make it sound like it's charity. It's not. It's just buy jerseys, go to the games. WNBA League Pass is one of the greatest deals in sports right now. Like, it's $40 and you get every game. Like, that's stealing. Go buy WNBA League Pass because you get to watch really good hoop all summer. And it's what you do if you're a basketball fan and you want something to watch at night. Like, it's not go buy it so that you can make a political statement or anything like that. Go buy it so you can enjoy the hoop. And I think that's where people get in trouble because they get too cutesy with it. They overthink it. And as I said yesterday to close out the show, I both love and hate when I have a guest on to talk about, like, a couple years ago when the Mystics were in the playoffs. And they text me after the hit and they're like, wow, you asked real basketball questions. I was like, yeah, what do you think I was going to do? Because they're so used to going on shows and being asked about whether or not the sport should exist. And I feel like the biggest cultural shift as we had is it's pretty clear now the argument has been won. The sport not only should, but not should only exist, but should thrive. And now we can start treating them like real sports, which means having really dumb, stupid debates like we do about everything else.
I'll end this with one story. Years ago, when I was a camp counselor and a sports teacher at the camp, a kid wore a Shamiqua Holdsclaw jersey to camp one day. He was a boy. A lot of the other boys made fun of them. I put every single one of those kids in detention, and their parents could not understand what was going on. I said, we're going to have a meeting after school today, or at the end of the week or whatever. And when I explained to them that we will not be making fun of little boys for wearing girls' athletes' jerseys, they were all like, well, dang, you were right. They deserved it. That's all.
Yeah. Now I'm going to go pick out which jersey I want to wear for the rest of the show. Clinton Yates with us here on the Hoffman Show each and every Friday. What's up on Daily today? People actually, let me ask you this. We should do this every Friday. What was your favorite episode of Daily from the week that if someone wants to listen to as they're popping around on their errands this weekend, they should put in their ears?
Probably today's. I talked with Wendy about the NBA playoffs, but mainly we got into a big time discussion about what's happening with gambling in the NBA. Very slippery slope as far as a lot of things are going on, and I feel at the top of mind for a lot of different sports leagues, not just the association.
That is 100% correct. We talked about that on the show yesterday, too. Clinton Yates, check him out, ESPN Daily. We'll talk to you next Friday here on the radio, sir, and I'll probably talk to you before then because that's tend to be how life goes.
Goodbye, Gregory.
Goodbye.
Hey, this is DA, and you're listening to The Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and the Odyssey app.